do a webinar today to talk about how to structure your ad budget to include social. And today the presenters that we have myself, I'm Cassie O'Median. I'm a Senior Account Manager at Hannafin Marketing. I'm also a blogger on PPC Hero. And also from Clicks Marketing, we have John Lee. Do you want to introduce yourself real quick, John?
Sure. Hi, everybody. This is John from Clicks Marketing, and yeah, I do PPC, right? Write about it, talk about it, blog about it. So here I am, and I'm glad the Hannah folks had me on today.
Great. Thanks, John. So also during the webinar today, we also would like you to join into the conversation. So if you want to get on Twitter and include the hashtag ThinkPPC in your tweets, if you have any questions about anything or just thoughts, go ahead and include that in your tweet. Or also you can use the webinar question box to send us questions during the presentation. At the very end, if we have time, we kind of have a lot of content to cover today, so I'm not sure if we'll get to it, but we'll also have a live kind of Q&A section at the end where we'll try to answer any questions that you guys have. Great, so we've got, as I mentioned, we kind of got a lot to cover today. So some of the topics that we're going to be covering is how businesses are budgeting for social media in 2014. We'll kind of give a quick overview on that. Talk a little bit about creating a social strategy, learning more about what are some of the social PPC options and which ones are best for your budget. And then we'll also talk a little bit more about tracking social media and being able to track ROI to be able to get more budget. We'll also be talking about the economy of scale, looking at small versus large budget success stories, and then also looking at best practices for measuring your social advertise or meeting your social advertising budget. We'll also look at different features that might be worth testing if you have a limited budget. And then the main question that everyone's mind today is how do I set a social ad budgets? So John will walk us through that process. So we've got lots of good stuff to cover today. Did I skip a poll question? Sorry, went a little too fast there.
That's all
So
right.
here you go, John.
All right. So our first poll question of the day. This one's an easy one. So how long have you been in PPC? Less than a year, 1 to 3 years, 3 to 5 years, or like me, 5+ years. And some PPC gray hair is growing now.
I'm right there with you there, John. I'm at the 5 year mark here, so I've definitely earned my gray PPC hair stripes. Great. Let's take a couple more minutes. Showing the poll results there. Looks like I don't know if they're posting correctly, but it looks like I don't know if the poll question, if the actual poll is going to post up on here, but the results, it looks like we've got a pretty good mix here. We've got the majority of our attendees are between 1 to 3 years. We have about 39% there. We got about 28% are less than 1 year experience, and then we got another 28% that are right there with you and I, John, with our PPC gray hairs with 5+ more experience. So I think we got a pretty good mix of people here today. And the content should be able to cover all of the of levels of experience there. Cool. So the next poll question we have before we dive into all the content here is just kind of get some more information about how you guys manage your accounts. Do you manage it yourself? Are you part of a team that manages it? Do you outsource it to account management? Or are you rethinking how your account is managed?
I always feel like we need to play the Jeopardy,
I
Final
know.
Jeopardy
Do,
music right
do,
here.
do, do. I know, and it looks like for some reason it's not posting on there, so I can just read off the answers to you guys. So it looks like majority of the our attendees today are managing it yourself. We had 67% of attendees are managing it themselves, and 33% are part of a team that manages it. So looks like we got a lot of in-house people in here today. So I think a lot of the content that we cover will be really helpful, especially to the in-house people. Great. So we can go ahead and dive right into the content here. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is just kind of taking a step back and looking at how businesses are planning for social media budgets for 2014. So within this study, it was based on data from a survey of like 500 large companies and how they're planning on budgeting for social media for 2014. It's pretty interesting to see. You can see they had like 45% or 45% of businesses expect their social media spending to increase up to 10% in 2014. Only 29% of businesses actually have separate budgets for social. People are still, they're realizing the importance of it, but they're haven't quite figured out how to actually set separate budgets for social yet. So, so a lot of that we'll be covering today. And then another interesting fact that I thought was interesting was that 23.9% of budgets are actually starting to shift from some of the traditional marketing channels such as print and television and radio and moving that into social media. So these are just a couple, kind of high level facts as far as what's from the survey that how people are starting to plan and budget for their social media. This is another study here, kind of breaks it down by industry to give you a little bit more insight as far as how people are breaking it down in the different percentages here. So as you can see, the gray areas for each of these different areas is how they're budgeting for social. So you can see the retail industry here seems to have the largest percent of budget allocated towards social, again with just overall digital media. Is the second bigger or metric there. And then also looks like technology is another area where they're starting to really expand their budgets for into social media. And a lot of other things like the brand marketing, obviously there's a lot there and that they have separated out for these different areas, but the social media budgets can also work with your branding budgets as well. So just thought this was some interesting information to kind of get a look into how the different industries are actually breaking down their marketing dollars and what percentage they're putting towards the various channels. Here's another study that I thought was kind of interesting as well. Again, it kind of breaks the overall marketing spending plans down into a little bit more into the different categories of online marketing and different types of marketing here. And as you can see, email marketing is one of the top areas that they have there. Again, social coming in second, and then search, and they included SEO and PPC is the same, which I think is a little strange. I know John and I were talking yesterday about that this is interesting, but we find the data can be a little confusing sometimes because um, as far as the like the fees that are going into it, it could vary depending on if they're using an agency, are they including like agency fees or just direct ad spend, and then lumping social or SEO and PPC together um, is kind of something a little different there too. Cool. So before really getting into the diving into the tactics and really building out everything, you really need to go take a step back and go back to the basics. A lot of people want to jump into when they decide that they're ready to jump into start doing some social media ads. They want to jump right into determining the tactics here. And okay, we want to do Facebook, and what are we going to do? Um, with that. But it's really important to, when you decide, because there's so many different targeting options available and there's just lots of options out there, that it's really important to take a step back and really think about what what are your goals. What are the overall goals that you're expecting to get from your program? Are you looking to get, is your goal going to be more focused on branding? It's going to be focused on more direct response or lead gen. These are all things that you need, that are important to really think through before you just jump right into it. Secondly, knowing your audience, as I had mentioned that, again with social, there's so many different targeting options available. So this is where, taking the time to really understand understand your target market and your audience. What is their, what's their age, their gender, what are their hobbies, what do they do for a living? Taking the time to really break out kind of your goals, then within those goals, let's say, for example, it's, a bit direct response, and you you want to make sure that, say, that you have, let's say you're targeting women between the ages of 25 and 35 that watch Oprah, I don't know, something like that. But really take the time to know your audience, because of all the different targeting options available, you can really hone in on, with the right channels, you can hone in on that very specific audience. And the next thing that's important to do too is, before you actually start diving into it, is take some time and analyze your competition. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. So not saying that just because your competitor is doing that, that's the right approach. I think it's important to take some time, kind of look and see what some of your competitors are doing. Make a, take a look and see what's working well and what maybe isn't working so well that you think that you could perform better. So those are some of the things to, kind of take a look at when you're analyzing your competition, and, kind of do maybe a little bit of a gap analysis there, where you see where your competitor might be weak, where your business would have more opportunity there in the social space. So after you've done that, the next thing we want to talk a little bit about is determining the tactics. So this is the part people like to jump into right away, but again, these other steps before are important to take in beforehand. So you're making sure that you're going after the right tactics. So for example, if you're solely lead gen, maybe Facebook's not the best option for you. If you're, there's just other options, or if you're direct response, maybe LinkedIn isn't the best response or tactic for you. So it just depends on kind of what your goals are, what you want to do, and then really determining what social tactics are best for you. And John's going to talk a little bit more about some of the different tactics that are out there and different types of testing that's available within each of these social platforms. Next thing to keep in mind is, when you're developing your strategy, is to determine a tone and frequency. So one thing to keep in mind with social is that social audiences and the people, they're really involved, they want to be very engaged, and they don't really appreciate a real hard sell. So it's important to make sure that the tone of your that the tone isn't like a hard sales pitch, and that you're not oversaturating your audience here with the content. So you really want to think about the actual content that you're going to be presenting to your audience. Make sure it's engaging, and make sure that determine how frequently you're going to be, met or posting to them, and make sure, and then determine what networks that you'll be posting on. Next, as far as engaging your audience, again, engagement is key really when it comes to social media. So you just really want to make sure that your content is solid, and that you're doing things that are really engaging your audience there. And things that work well for that are maybe promotions, or things that allow you to kind of break into, especially for direct response. Uh, there, that some of the different promotions seemed a good way to really, engage your audience and be able to kind of get into um, the actual selling stuff. And last but definitely not least would be, make sure to keep it fresh. Keeping ad copy fresh is key in social. If your click through rates drop, especially for LinkedIn and Facebook, your ads just fall right off the boat there. So you want to make sure that you're taking the time, and that you're really, keeping your ad copy fresh, and that you have the resources to do it. So what social PPC is best for you? Well, it depends. So it really does vary from different channels. So if you're, direct response B2C versus your B2B, like I mentioned, Facebook might be, or um, a better option for a B2C, versus LinkedIn, it might be better for B2B. It depends what your budget is. You have a larger budget or a smaller budget. Really, you can do any of these with a large versus budget versus a small budget, but it really just depends on that's why it's important to kind of do the first step as far as creating the strategy and thinking through all the things and your goals and kind of what your end goal is and what your actual budget is. So we'll talk about some of the options that are available. So let's say, for example, for PPC social options, we'll talk about Facebook. Some of the different options that are available through Facebook, they have interest and category targeting. You can create custom audiences where you target, let's say you have a list of email signups that you have, you can upload those and target those audiences. And there's also the option of lookalike audiences, so you can target people that are similar to people, let's say, that have maybe ordered your product before or something. And then Facebook also has things like Facebook Exchange, um, the Facebook retargeting. You can retarget right in the news feed. So these are some really great options that are available through Facebook. The costs are pretty, really pretty minimal. I mean, you can really get into Facebook with a very small budget. Obviously, the more money that you have to spend, the more data that you'll have, and the more options that you'll have to test out different things. And I know John's going to kind of go into some of these different testing options a little bit further on in the presentation. One example that I had mentioned previously too, that Facebook might be a better option for, let's say, direct response or B2C. And for one particular client, we had a case study where we had a health supplement vertical, that was a B2C client there, and in their Facebook program, they ended up having 79% lower CPAs on actual conversions versus Google and Bing, which was really quite amazing. And again, this is, I don't want it to be, this is just for this vertical. It may not, it can vary between different verticals and accounts and stuff. Um, the volume was lower as far as the actual conversions compared to Google and Bing, but it was a pretty significantly lower CPA compared to the other channels. So we found that to be very successful.
Yeah, and again, I would second that notion that this is definitely an exception and not the rule, and in fact,
Mhm.
almost exceptional to see that kind of difference from a social ad channel versus particularly search. But again, great that you got that.
Yeah, it was just a category. It was a category and interest targeting. Just we had the targeting set up really well, and we just really saw some tremendous success with it. So, just wanted to call it out there. But yeah, definitely, like John said, this could definitely be the exception to the rule. But just know that there are options out there, and you can actually track the actual conversions, and it doesn't have to just be likes. Cool. So next, talk a little bit about LinkedIn. So for PPC for LinkedIn, LinkedIn might be better for, let's say, more lead gen or B2B clients here. And a couple things to keep in mind when it comes to LinkedIn is that um, might have might need to have a little bit higher budget for LinkedIn because of there are some CPC minimums for LinkedIn. There's a minimum CPC of $2, and that's really the bottom of the barrel there. You're better off really kind of starting with your bids a little bit higher to have more success there. And then there's all kinds of different targeting options available as far as your job title, the function, um, the different industries, your geography, age, gender, all that stuff, even LinkedIn groups. So there's lots of different targeting options that are available there. Um, so those are some options there. You can create up to 100 targets per campaign for the company, job title, school, skills, and group. And a couple things to keep in mind for regarding the actual budgets and performance tips is that even though, like I mentioned, there's a minimum CPC of $2, and that could, really scare somebody off or freak somebody out, saying that, oh my gosh, that's really high CPC. But because of the just the different targeting options that are available, we typically have seen higher, even though CPCs are higher, the conversion rates tend to be a lot higher as well due to the targeting options. And I don't know if you have any experience, John, with LinkedIn and if you've noticed the same.
Well, yeah, in terms of the CPCs, I mean, it's very rare that you're going to get much traffic at a $2 CPC. Again,
Mhm.
that's there as a baseline. And even at that, you're going to get some suggested CPCs thrown at you once you have your campaign built. And again, take those with a grain of salt as well. My general rule of thumb has been, kind of take that, whatever the ceiling is on their recommended bid, add $2 at least for launch, and then back off from there as I see, impression and click volume. But yeah, it's, LinkedIn is its own special little channel. So uh, tread
Yeah,
tread cautiously.
yeah, definitely. Cool. All right. So a couple other another little graph here that as far as when it comes to lead gen, this was one that I pulled that was provided by LinkedIn. Probably why it shows it this, but I think it holds pretty true for the most part when it comes to um, the lead gen network. And as you can see here, it's showing that the LinkedIn tends to have again the higher conversion rate compared to like Facebook or Twitter. And then last but not least that we're going to cover today, obviously there's some other options, but we're just going to cover the top three for in this portion of it anyways. So there's Twitter, and Twitter can, definitely be good for B2B or B2C. And some of the different options that we have through Twitter are the promoted tweets that tend to work really well for, B2C or B2B. Promoted accounts work really well for B2C, and I know John's going to kind of cover some more of these a little bit more in depth and throughout later in the presentation. And a newer option that's, I think it's still relatively new to Twitter is they have their Twitter lead cards. And so these would work really well for maybe, B2B, where you can actually collect people's email addresses and target by audiences and then keywords and hashtags. So this is a newer feature that's out there, so just something to keep in mind. And that again, the same thing, that avoid the hard sell, especially with Twitter, is key, and that keeping the 20 character call to action seems to be very successful as well. Now, I haven't had a lot of experience with the Twitter lead cards yet, but I've been reading about them, and I'm really excited to get to try it out.
Yeah, and I get to do a bit of a test with them. Unfortunately, a lot of my lead gen, clients request a phone
Hmm.
number typically, so that they can quickly qualify those leads. And at least for the moment, you can't do that with the Twitter lead card just yet. So again, still relatively new for me as well, but I think it's one of the most amazing innovations coming around, um, around social advertising in a long while.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to learn more about it. Cool. So next, tracking. So as a lot of in the past, people are dedicating social budget, but it's been hard to really, you know, um, pinpoint back conversions and be able to track back to the social. How do you actually track conversions coming from social? You're putting all this money into it, and that's really key to getting more budget um, from your boss or your client or whoever. So, um, Willy Wonka here is going to talk about how we can actually find how many of these are actually paying customers. So first, we'll talk about Facebook. So with Facebook, it, it's no longer, it doesn't have to be just likes and social impressions anymore. They have, Facebook actually has their own conversion tracking set up right in their interface, which is works really well. I use it in several of my accounts. There's several options you can track, a website convert offline external conversions. You can track things, different offers, different claims, different things back within your Facebook page as well. So there's a lot of different options that you can use in Facebook to really track back to the actual an order or a lead or something, and be able to really put some numbers to it to be able to get more budget. And I believe that the pixel, the conversion pixel for Facebook is like a 28-day pixel or cookie window. Oops, sorry. So next, and I think all of these social ones that we're talking about today actually do offer their own type of tracking system. So LinkedIn also has their own tracking system. It's an account lead collection. The only thing is you can only see the conversions directly within LinkedIn. And then you can get the member's name, the headline, LinkedIn profile, and email through LinkedIn. So that's it's I don't think it's as quite as extensive as like the Facebook or even Twitter yet, but you are able to get lead data directly in LinkedIn now.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hassle. It does
Is
work,
it?
right? Because again,
Yeah.
people like to stay. I mean, the same goes for Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, right? People like to stay within that environment. So if somebody has the option to simply click a little link, right, click a little button and push a button that says request contact, then they're more likely to do that. But as a marketer, as an advertiser, it's a royal pain in the rear, right? To have to
Yeah.
deal with that, it's always associated back to an individual, right? Who's the admin on the account? So LinkedIn, if you're listening, it's definitely something you need to upgrade.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. And so as we mentioned, like Twitter, they also have their they just this is pretty new and I'm still new to the Twitter game myself a little bit, so learning more a little bit more about it here and there. And they they're rolling out their new conversion tracking as well. So you can use the conversion tracking for their promoted tweets. And that they have also you can set custom attribution windows from 1 day, 7 days, 14 days, or back to 30 days.
Yeah, I
So
think what's most exciting is, and you can see it there towards the bottom of that screenshot, is the, you know, within Twitter attribution. So
mhm,
did a retweet, have anything to do with ultimately with the conversion, things like that? It's actually pretty interesting, and it's a much deeper level of tracking than you might get with just the standard, Google AdWords conversion tag or even the Facebook
yeah.
conversion tag. So it's interesting, but it's still new. People are still kind of learning the ropes. So
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've heard that it definitely is a lot more in depth, especially compared to LinkedIn there. So um, cool. So if some other options too that I think are important that just again to give you a more holistic view at everything is when you're using your social, when you're doing social ads, that it's important to still um, use maybe something, another analytics tool like Google Analytics, and they have the Google Analytics URL builder where you can um, enter in your UTM parameters and just make sure that you're adding the additional parameters on your URL so you can pull out all that data in Google Analytics and then be able to optimize and just really helps Google. That way you can look at it a whole and say, okay, how many orders are coming from each of these various channels and really kind of give you a bigger picture to look at it holistically. So I think that that's really important to make sure that you're doing so you can go back and say, okay, well, maybe just from the first looks, they think they're just getting just likes from um, Facebook, and then they go back through by looking at Google Analytics and all the tracking and say that, well, actually, we're getting, 20% of our 30% of our orders are actually coming from there too. So being able to have that data and have those numbers to be able to take back to your boss, your client, to show them that you're actually getting results from these various social channels, I think is really important to getting more budget.
yeah, and again, even deeper, right, it goes into the attribution
Yeah.
conversation where maybe your social ad campaign isn't converting on that first visit, but you've at least created a relationship, and maybe they're going to come back through search, whether that be PPC or SEO, or they come back through another channel, and that way you've at least got that baseline data and can track them through the multi-channel funnels. And again, another point to make is for those who've done Facebook advertising in the past, maybe particularly with page post ads, is it used to be you couldn't tag, like Google Analytics parameters unless you were some brainiac whiz who created some unique system to do so. The good news is that that's not the case anymore. So when you build a page post ad, which again gives you access to the newsfeed ads, again there is a place to input these UTM parameters so that you can track those clicks back to your site. So again, that's an important one to remember.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, John. All right. So it looks like we have another poll question here.
Yep. All right. So question number 3, getting a little more specific. So again, which types of ads do you most often deal with your social advertising? And so, there are numerous options. Ads, which in this case we're dealing with right-hand placement on Facebook, right-hand placement on LinkedIn, sponsored stories, which they're really not calling them that anymore, but sponsored story or page post ads, mobile only for Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, video ads, which probably a very small percentage of you are doing, and then those of you who are doing everything.
All right. So it looks like we're still voting. I know, I think the sponsor story, those are the ones that, the sponsor stories, aren't they sunsetting that program?
That's right. That's
And
correct.
I think it's in April or something like that that they're starting to sunset that program. Kind of a bummer there. All right. Well, it looks like we got our poll results in, and it looks like majority, we have 56% of the attendees today are just doing social ads, like the right-hand side ones. Um, so we have majority of them are doing those. We have 28% are doing anything and everything, and about 17% are doing the sponsored stories. All right. Cool. So I guess we'll go ahead and talk about throw it over to you, John.
All right. Hello, everybody. All right. So let's get a little more into the budget conversation. We've got the baseline now of some of the opportunities within social advertising and kind of which direction should you go. So let's start talking a little bit about budgets and starting with economy of scale. So there's small versus large budgets and what kind of success should you be expecting. And the question is really, is social media advertising easier with a larger budget? And honestly, in a word, yes. So uh, unfortunately, go ahead and switch
Oh,
there.
sorry about that.
So again, economy of scale for those of you who have slept since you took economy in high school and or college. Um, so it's a proportionate saving in costs gained by an increased level of production, right? So again, as you are doing more, in this case, spending more, that cost is actually distributed over a much larger pool in terms of basically distributing the risk, across multiple points. And so, how does that apply to social advertising? Well, in this case, I like to think of it as translating that cost into time and efficiency. And so, again, when you have more budget, you're going to be pulling in more impressions, clicks, conversions, which is more data, right? That data that you need to do faster and more accurate optimization. And so again, more budget is going to give you this bigger data pool to speed up the learning process and then distribute then your learned optimization across all of these campaigns. And again, get all the data, right? So no
Data.
webinar is complete without fun memes. All right. So, why a large budget? And again, I'm just get the record straight. I'm not recommending everybody go and get as much money as you possibly can for social advertising. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm saying is it's easier, right? You're effectively greasing the wheels with a larger budget. And why is that? Well, there's this pesky thing. There's a lack of ad scheduling, right? So with traditional search and even display, through the Google Display Network, again, you can say, okay, turn my ads on at 8 a.m., turn them off at 10 p.m., and distribute my budget evenly in between. That's awesome. We don't have that necessarily with social advertising. Again, there's such a large number of targeting options and features, bells, whistles, etc. And when you have a limited budget, it's pretty hard to pick and choose, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Again, while the targeting is specific and it's detailed, it's still comparatively relatively broad. So again, it's not like search where somebody is doing an active search for your product and your service, and boom, there's your ad giving them the answer to what they look for. Social is very different, right? So we're trying to pull them away from the content. They're looking at say, hey, based on who you are and what you do, my service or my product is relevant to you. Again, we're dealing with, again, comparatively high CPCs. Facebook, I think, is kind of the exception here. You can get pretty good cost per click on Facebook. And again, there's a really large audience. So there are a lot of people using social media, duh, right? And so again, there's high impression, high click potential. Again, with a super low budget, you're really just inhibiting yourself. And again, the traffic velocity dictates your testing speed and potentially even the accuracy of your testing. And so again, Cassie mentioned this earlier, is that Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn less so with Twitter, but still, there's a high ad turnover rate, right? So again, these ads, they come in, they push them to the top in terms of rotation, and you're going to get a spike in traffic. Click-through rate's going to be okay, and then if your click-through rate falters since the time you spit, that ad falls out of rotation. Bye-bye impressions, bye-bye clicks. And so you're constantly updating these ads, constantly trying to learn what's working. It's really hard to do that quickly with a really low capped budget.
Yeah, and it can be, yeah, very very time consuming too to keep up all those the ads unless you have maybe another third party tool or something that allows you to do it more frequently. So it kind of takes a lot of manpower too to keep those ads fresh.
Right? And that's when the phrase return on time investment really comes into play.
Yeah, exactly. And with a larger budget, you probably would have more time to do that versus smaller budget.
Absolutely. All right. So now, does this mean that small budget advertisers are just completely SOL, to use that colorful phrase? No, right? So yes, your data accumulation and optimization efforts will take longer and potentially be less efficient. What it means is ultimately that you need to be more prudent with picking the channel and picking which features and targeting methods you're going to run with. All right, so which features really are worth testing when you have a limited budget? The most targeted ones, right? But Captain Obvious to the rescue here. So, more seriously though, let's look at it from the perspective of a nice pyramid, right? So starting at the top, what's the most targeted method of getting your message out there on these social channels to maybe what's more broad? And yeah, you're going to get a ton of traffic, but maybe it's a little bit less targeted. And so this is Facebook, right? So custom audiences, again, for those of you who are not aware of what those are, is you can take an email list or a phone number list, upload that into Facebook, and they're going to scrub it against their list of users and then say, okay, this many people out of your original list are active users that you can now target with ads. And so this is really helpful when maybe you're doing some like a long-term drip campaign, pushing somebody through your sales process, and you can say, okay, I've got somebody, yeah, they're a lead, but maybe they're not really ready to buy yet, so let's build a custom audience for them and serve them an ad that says, hey, here's some additional information. Maybe you should come back and download my white paper, or hey, are you ready to buy? Whatever the case may be. Again, that's going to be very targeted and very specific in use as well. And then lookalike audiences are really kind of an extension of that, but it opens up the floodgates a little bit, right? So, it's saying, okay, I built a custom audience. These are people that I have a relationship with already in some format. Facebook, please build a lookalike audience based on those users. And so, like I said, it opens up the targeting a bit. You're going to be touching people potentially that you don't have a previous relationship with, so that's awesome. Good place to go. And then moving along, maybe you test some Facebook Exchange, remarketing, potentially looking at doing the new website custom audiences, which is Facebook's kind of home baked remarketing. I mean, that's not really remarketing, but at any rate, again, that's another really targeted way of utilizing Facebook advertising. And then let's start to blow this up, right? So let's talk about, okay, I want a much bigger audience pool. I really want to get out there, find new business, new customers, new sales, new leads, et cetera, et cetera. So again, let's start with creating a campaign, right-hand ads, maybe even a newsfeed ad, and say, okay, I want to target people who have liked my business page or people that are similar to those connections. And again, it's a targeted method, but it doesn't mean that they've actually been to your website. It doesn't mean that they've done anything other than say, yeah, I like your page. So again, pretty targeted way of accessing those individuals. And then we get to the fun part, right? Interest targeting, partner category targeting. This is where all that juicy persona information, based on your research, when you're developing the strategy that you're going to apply to these social channels. But it comes with a risk. The targeting is pretty open. You're going to be touching a much larger pool. Your reach, right? That's the official term. The reach is going to open quite a bit. So let's move on to the next one, LinkedIn. I'll try to speed through these a little bit here. So LinkedIn is a bit on the confusing side in terms of their campaign ad structure. Um, Interesting factoid for those of you who are doing Facebook. So Facebook is actually going to be transitioning their campaign structure to be much more similar to what we're used to, say, with Google AdWords and our PPC campaigns. So there's going to be a campaign ad group and then your ad instead of just campaign ad. So giving you that extra layer to group ads together in obvious segmentations. LinkedIn desperately needs this, but they don't. They don't, and it makes it so frustrating. That being said, again, if you're careful with how you create your campaigns, you can isolate all these different targeting features. And so that's really the way to go um, to approach this. So the most targeted though is to say, okay, I've got a single campaign, and I'm just going to layer on as many of these targeting features as I can to make the most specific audience. And common sense would tell you, okay, well, that's exactly what I should be doing all the time. Well, the problem with that is, like I said, it limits the audience. So it's a very, very specific audience, and it's possible you're going to be missing some individuals that maybe you do want them to see your ad. You want them to click, engage with you on your website. So again, that's the most targeted. Again, lumping, companies, industries, gender, location, skills, all of these different pieces. Yeah, that's great, but it's going to really shrink that audience pool. So then you can start to relax that a little bit. So let's say we're just going to run with companies and industries. And maybe I want to target just nonprofits, or I want to target, plumbers, right? Whatever the case may be. That's one way to go. Then we can open it up to job titles or job categories. And so I've done this a few times where we want to be talking to the C-level executive of a particular company. LinkedIn actually has a really cool job category that's CXO. So it's kind of a wild card for anybody that's a C-level executive, and really good when you're doing B2B advertising. Then you can look at skills. So I want to target anybody who's in marketing. Yahoo, pretty open, but can still be pretty effective. Then last but not least are groups, and groups are a great way to get a large audience on LinkedIn. I haven't always found them to be the most effective, either from a click-through rate perspective or even a conversion rate perspective, but they still serve a purpose. They still have a place. Then let's talk about Twitter. Twitter's features aren't necessarily as widespread, but that's a bit ambiguous. When you take into the fact that you can actually target by keywords, that obviously means there are millions and millions of other ways to target on Twitter versus LinkedIn and Facebook. But let's talk about options, or what are the options to target. So either most specific or promoted tweets where you're targeting users of Twitter that are similar to your existing followers. So people who match the same set of demographics, location, interests, Twitter usage, all those different pieces. It's a pretty safe place to start, particularly if you've never advertised in Twitter before. But like I said, that's kind of the easy first step. Secondarily to that is creating another type of similar user audience. In this case, you can plug in Twitter handles. And so I really like to give the examples of going after your competitors and say, okay, I want to target people that are similar to the followers of competitor A, competitor B, competitor C. And you're not necessarily taking anything away from them, or even necessarily targeting their followers, but you're just saying, I want individuals who are similar to, based on their usage, based on their demographics. But again, you can go after thought leaders, relevant publications, things like that, things that are tied back into your product, to your service. Then opening it up from there, let's start talking about keywords. And this could be promoted tweets either for search or promoted tweets for timeline, either one. But again, exact and phrase match keywords. And in this case, they work pretty much like you would think they would work based on your experience with the traditional PPC advertising. And of course, we can open it up and utilize broad match or open match to pull in, those wildcards, right? Things that are similar but not exactly the right word. And then there's interests. I'm not a big fan of interests on Twitter, but they are there. It's a preset. It's not like Facebook where you just start to type in stuff and see what happens. It's a preset list that you can cycle through and pick and choose from. but it can be effective. And again, you could also utilize that to layer on top of these other targeting features as well, should you choose to do so. And then the kind of the big wide open one, honestly, I argued whether to include it or not, and that's promoted accounts. Um, but again, that assumes your goal is direct response, right? You want people to convert on your website. Obviously, if you're just a traditional social manager and you're just trying to get engagement and build your audience on Twitter, you know what? That promoted account's probably at the top, and that's okay. So moving on. All right, so what about metering your budget? So again, if you have a small budget, you're not going to be able to test everything at once. So again, some obvious statements here, but always, always worth responding. Test one channel at a time, test one feature at a time, and again, refer back to those pyramids. Yes, you can blend feature sets and channels. Again, once you've really established what works for you, again, if need be, manually pause and resume campaigns to effectively establish an ad schedule, whether that be time of day or day of week. Again, use your conversion stats, use that analytics data. Say, okay, well, Tuesdays, for whatever reason, my traffic sucks and nobody converts. Well, don't run your campaigns on Tuesday. And again, with Twitter, we do get the feature to utilize standard ad delivery to actually pace the budget through the course of the day. And that's pretty effective, and it's not going to last you the full 24 hours necessarily, particularly on a small cap budget, but it definitely will get you more exposure in the long run in the better hours of the day. All right, so let's get more bang for our buck. We'll look at this through two perspectives, right? So are you really interested in kind of this long-term play, get some sustained impressions, sustained clicks, and not necessarily do a big splash? Well, okay, let's look at some of these features and where maybe you should start. With Facebook, again, let's talk about the right-hand placement ads. So again, low CPC, slow but steady traffic, but again, good, safe place to start. I'll talk about the newsfeed ads. Those are going to get you more activity, and that's a good thing, but that's why they're not on this list initially. With LinkedIn, we've got our traditional ad placements, which are, again, analogous to the right-hand placement on Facebook. But again, in this case, it will be high CPC, but still slow to moderate traffic. With Twitter, frankly, any promoted tweet format, but in this case, look at bidding low and keeping it to standard delivery. Again, you're going to get a low CPC, and you're going to get some steady traffic. Now, on the flip side, if you're ready to, open the floodgates a bit, and you've established, a larger budget, and we'll talk more about budget here in a second. Okay, what should you start doing now? So Facebook, let's look at newsfeed ads on desktops and mobile. Newsfeed ads get a tremendously higher click-through rate. You're going to get far more activity, and the reason for that is obvious, right? So if the ad is in the newsfeed, a lot of people don't realize that they're sponsored, even though it says sponsored, and so they're going to click through. They're going to engage with that ad. LinkedIn, same story. The sponsored updates, again, seeing far more activity here, a lot more response, a lot more conversions. Do it. It's a good thing. So high click-through rate, moderate to high CPC. And then with Twitter, again, any promoted tweet format, in this case, start cranking up those bids. Crank them up. You're going to get your ad heavier into rotation for your targeted audience, and then switch out to accelerated delivery, right? So just slam it away all day until that budget is gone. All right, so how do you set a social budget? And frankly, this is really the holy grail that, again, just one-off advertisers like a lot of you, agencies, again, like Clicks and Hannafin, this is what we're always trying to find.
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to tell you guys, there really is no exact number. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to determine a budget. So, what do we do other than make Monty Python jokes? So at a glance, frankly, what's available to you? Again, it's really going to be based on your business limitations, your overall marketing budget. Is there room in here to expand, to contract, whatever, divert funds? One thing that I like to do with clients is look at, okay, are there any areas of wasted spend in another marketing channel? So maybe we've got a campaign that's, yes, it's important, where you are getting some leads from it, but maybe it's a higher cost per acquisition or cost per sale. It's like, okay, for the short term, let's pause this campaign, divert that budget to social so we can do some testing and see what we can get out of it. So the other way then is to back into the math. But even at this, is not really an exact science. And so I'll talk you guys through one potential example, one potential scenario. Next.
Sorry.
Look at creating an account and start to build a hypothetical campaign. Now, this assumes a lot, right? And I know that, but we've got a short amount of time, right? It assumes that you've come into this with a base strategy. So I know who my potential customers are. I know where they're at. I know their gender. I know where they work, generally speaking. Again, you've got this baseline of data that you say, okay, now I can go into these social channels, start plugging that info in to build my target sets. What does that give me in terms of an audience size? How does my bid affect that, et cetera? So again, you can plug those in. Again, LinkedIn is going to give you suggested CPC. Twitter, you can actually plug in your bid, in this case, an eCPC, engagement cost per click, and it'll actually adjust that little slide rule there on the right-hand side to show you, hey, here's your estimated reach based on your bid. And that's a powerful, powerful tool. Moving on. All right, so again, like I said, I'm going to talk you through one potential scenario for trying to establish, just pulling it out of thin air, right? Establish a budget to run with on social. And so again, this is the conversion-based formula. Again, there's also some assumptions here. This assumes that you're running marketing and other channels online where you have a baseline of data. You understand, okay, I drive X amount of traffic, I get this many conversions. And again, it's not an apples to apples comparison, but maybe it's apples to oranges. We're still in the fruit world. Utilize your display advertising information to influence some of your decisions, right? Because again, click-through rates are in the same ballpark. Frequently, conversion rates can be, not always. Again, that's not a perfect statement that's going to hold across every account, every vertical. But again, it's a good place to start. So looking at that data, how many clicks does it take to generate a conversion, right? So what is that conversion rate? Then you can look at, okay, so based on that kind of that dummy campaign that you created, you determined an estimated cost per click or eCPC. Say, okay, well, here's this number of clicks per conversion times that estimated CPC. It's going to give you a rough ballpark of potentially what your cost per social conversion could be. And so again, we can take that then and say, okay, well, for this to be successful, for this campaign to be successful, I need this many conversions. And you're setting that out. Again, is this a guarantee you're going to get them? No. But again, it's a place to start to establish a baseline of data to work against. So take that desired number of social conversions and multiply that by the cost per social conversion that you established in the first formula. It's going to give you a potential budget, right? Now, does it mean you have to spend all of that? No. But it's going to say, okay, this is potentially how much I could spend per month, going forward in this particular channel. So again, there's a little bit of legwork there, and again, you can change out the metrics, to determine another formula alternative. But again, this is a place to start. Again, I've done quite a bit of research with my own clients and trying to understand, okay, what is the budget we should run with? And so many times I'll come back with a recommendation. The client's like, well, that sounds great, but you know what? I've got $2,000 to spend on Facebook this month. Great, wonderful. Again, if you're an in-house individual, again, you probably have a very good handle on what the potential budget is. And so in this case, right, it's that pros, cons. If I pull money from one channel, what's going to happen? Overall, can I risk that to test the new channel? So again, there are so many factors here, but the main idea here to keep yourself in line is to go through these steps, right? So understand, how do you want to target? Where should I start targeting in Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and just work yourself out from there in a cautious manner.
All right. Well, thanks, John. And it looks like we're getting to the end now here of the webinar. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to have time for any questions, but we have one last poll question we want to cover real quick. And so um, we're wondering if you would like help with your PPC accounts and management. So if you would take a quick moment to answer if you'd be interested in a free solutions blueprint from Hannafin Marketing. We look at your account, provide some analysis. These are for accounts with over 20,000 in ad spend, or get some free opportunity analysis on your paid search, display, and social media advertising campaigns from Clicks Marketing. So if you just take a quick moment to answer those, great.
And again, in terms of the Q&A, we've been making a list of your questions. And
Yes.
so there will be a follow-up blog post on PPC Hero where Cassie and I will do our best to answer your questions. So again, apologies, we ran out of time. We both obviously like to talk. So
Yeah, probably a dangerous combination there. So, um, great. Well, we are kind of at the end of end of the hour here, so I think we're going to wrap it. But I just wanted to thank everyone for attending today. And like I said, we've got all of your questions here, so we'll take some time to answer them and follow up with on PPC Hero. So, thanks everyone for your time today,
all right, thank
and
you,
thank you,
everyone.
John. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.